Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Moment Mastermind, your pick-me-up for every Friday to answer your top job search questions. My name is Shira Lotzar. Delighted to be your host today. I am a higher purpose champion. I am both a recruiter for the association sector. I'm also a career coach. Love to help folks with their branding, to get noticed by recruiters, resume writing and LinkedIn profiles and networking and all kinds of good stuff. I'm also the co-founder and volunteer of boomerworks.org. We are a community service helping professionals age 50 plus to re-career into self-employment. So if you know somebody who fits in that category, feel free to have them check us out. So we have our guest experts today, actually several of them. Unfortunately, weren't able to be with us, but we have some substitutes and we're excited about that. So we have Michelle Wright, who's with us. Yay, Michelle. She's the one from Nashville who just overcame the inclement weather. We're glad that she's back with us. Vern Schellinger is able to be with us today, who is a networking and career relationship building coach. And we also have Rick Webb, who is substituting for Joe Weech. He's actually going to be part of our entourage now, I think, going forward, as well as Wendy Thompson, who is here in place of Corliss Jackson. So we are excited to have everyone here with us. So the format for today's session, we're going to start as per usual with a 10-minute breakout. That breakout room is specifically designed to identify your group's top question, I should say questions even. If you go ahead and assign a scribe to your room, go around the room and just see, who has what job search question. Once we get back into the main room, the scribe will chat all of that into the chat box. Make sure to don't chat while you're in the room, chat while you're back in the main room so everybody can see the chat. And while you're in that room, go ahead and share any best practices that you've had from your job search. It's sort of like an encouraging, time. Then we are going to have our main group discussion, and we would request that everybody please remain muted when you're in the main room, so the facilitators can have and experts can have time to share best practices. And please just post your questions in the chat. At 10:05. We'll offer a 10-minute speed networking breakout session. And that session, different than the first one, is really about you. It's about your career goals, your aspirations, what are you looking for, and all of that. And so you guys can share with each other and then share some job leads. We do have 3 different ways for you guys to keep in touch with us. Our Power Networking spreadsheet, which there's a bit.ly here, the recording of the Q&A, here's a link, and then our job search resources page, which we're continually updating with articles and books and apps. And if you have any resources that you think the group should be aware of, please chat me directly and I'll make sure to put them up there. And when we get back in the main room, I will be posting all of these links in the chat box. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and get into our breakout session. So just give me a minute while
excuse me.
Get everybody in these rooms. Just give me a second here. Okay, go ahead and hit your blue join button and you'll be assigned to a room.
Hey, Shira. Sorry I'm late. Is everyone in breakouts already?
No worries. You should have a breakout room assigned to you. Maybe it's at the bottom of your screen. Could be here. I did assign you a room.
Thank you. Sorry, I had a parent-teacher conference.
No worries.
Oh, wait. Join breakout room. Yep. Got it. See ya.
Uh-huh. Hey, Dia, you're actually assigned to a breakout room as well as Sandra. If you go ahead and look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little button, maybe like 3 dots or something. Mary Beth as well, you have one. Mary Beth, you're assigned to room 5. Dia and Sandra, you're assigned to rooms 4. You just click around on your Zoom, you should be able to find it. Mary Beth, do you want me to reassign you to something? Oh, there you are. Mary Beth, can you find it? Do you want me to reassign you? Hey, Kelly, I'm going to put you in a breakout. Paul and Kelly, you were just assigned a breakout room.
Yep.
Okay. Mary Beth, are you still not finding it? And Dia, you have one as well. You're in a breakout too. I can't hear you, Mary Beth. Paul, I'm assigning you to room 4 or room 6 rather.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Mary Beth and Dia, are you guys just stuck? You're stuck. I'm going to assign you to another room. I'm going to assign you to breakout room 7, Mary Beth. And see if you can see that. I just did give you another room. Can't hear you, Mary Beth. Do you want to pop out and pop back in? Maybe that'll kickstart things again. Not working for you, Mary Beth? Hey, Noreen, I'm gonna put you into a breakout room.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No worries, all good. Hey, Janet. Oh, she's not there. Hey, Janet, I'm going to go ahead and put you in a breakout room. For those who are watching this recording afterwards, we still have another 3 minutes, then we'll come back to the breakout room, into the main room rather.
Hi, I was kicked out of the meeting.
Oh, we're all back together now. Thanks for
Okay,
for being
okay,
with
thank
us.
you. I am using my phone, so this is why. Thank you.
All good. All right. If you could put yourself on mute, that would be fantastic. Thank you. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hope that was a good networking session. So if you were the scribe, go ahead and start putting all those questions in the chat box, and we will start getting to them. And while we're waiting for that, we'll go ahead and start with a tip. So a few of us experts were chatting in advance, and Rick, if you were with us, here you are. You want to go ahead and just give your little tip about being an exceptional job seeker? I think you and I both have something to say about that. You're on mute. You're on mute, Rick.
Sorry about that. Just that there is a difference between an exceptional job seeker and an average job seeker. And so I look at resumes all week long. And when I see someone that doesn't take the time to customize their resume to the specific job, I can't stress enough. I feel like a broken record because I say this every week almost, but it's so important because when I look at that, it helps me tie the pieces together, right? I can see that person in the job because they've done this, this, and this. In addition, sending a cover letter that also addresses how you fit the job tells me that you're a person that is diligent and really is interested in this position. And if you don't do that, you just throw a resume against the wall, a generic resume. And I'm guilty. I've done the same thing. So I'm not accusing anyone. And you just don't get the same responses that you would if you take the time to customize to show that you are truly interested in the position.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I could not agree with that more. In fact, I think one of the best tips that I would have for any job seeker, particularly those of you who have been hiring managers, you don't have to have been a recruiter, you don't have to have been an HR. I know although some of you are in this call, but if you've ever been a hiring manager and now you're a job seeker, I want you to put your hiring manager hat back on. What was it like when you had 50 resumes, 100 resumes come across your desk? How did you do the vetting? What were you looking for? And if you've never been a hiring manager, try to imagine what that's like to have resume after resume after resume. You've got one job and you've got limited amount of time, very limited amount of time. Whether you're a full-time recruiter or hiring is not something that you hardly ever do. You are a busy, busy person. And you have to make these very snap decisions. How are you going to do it? You're going to be looking at that job description that you've put together. Hopefully you crafted it really well. And you've got certain skills, potentially certain industry background, and you're looking quick. You're scanning that resume. I mean, in 2.5 seconds. It's just the way of the world these days. This is not 1985. We don't sit there with hard copies or faxes or anything, right? I'm just saying, I mean, this is a scanning world. And so you've got to really, really put your hiring manager hat on. And I'll just give one quick example of my own desk, literally right now, this hot second. I'm completing an executive director search for an association, and today is the last day of application. This posting has been open for a month, and I appreciate not everybody would have seen it right in the beginning. And yet I've had a couple of resumes come in literally in the last 24 hours. And I specifically asked people to write, very customized, tailored resumes and cover letters. And it's super specific. I'm like, please address your qualifications and your competencies. And I had an individual last night who wrote me, who did a thoughtful cover letter, but it was all about his leadership style. Nothing wrong with that. That's great. Talk about being a servant leader, all of this. Did not address at all anything about the actual job, the competencies that we were looking for. And it wasn't in the resume either. I just could not move him forward. It was unfortunate, but not to mention he applied right at the end. And that's my other tip here is the second you see a job announcement and you think that you are qualified, do not wait. Be thoughtful, but also be expeditious. You got to have that balance. Okay. So don't just, hit send on the one hand. We got to be thoughtful and customize. On the other hand, do not wait. Even if there's a posting that says there's a last minute deadline, that recruiter could have already vetted and selected and narrowed down their top pool long before the deadline is even ended. Okay. So make sure that you apply as soon as possible and still be thoughtful, right? To kind of have that balance. All right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into our questions. And Wendy is going to be our chat monitor today. So Wendy, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
Sure. Okay, so the first one is, why do hiring managers ask, name a time you were given a task and had very little or unclear directions? And what's the best way to answer that question?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I'm going to approach that. I'm going to answer it a little differently. Then we'll make sure our experts answer it directly. The kind of question that person is talking about is what we call in recruiting a behavioral question, a behavioral interview question. It's trying to identify your professional behaviors. That particular question has a lot to do, I think, with agility and flexibility, ambiguity, frankly, in a job, which most jobs have these days. So they're trying to test for that to see, well, how did you overcome something when you were, or how did you handle something when the situation was ambiguous? But they could be asking about any kind of behavioral skill. They could be asking a question that talks about your critical thinking skills or strategic thinking skills or conflict resolution or team relationship or detail, or pick a soft skill, a behavioral skill, and those kinds of questions will come up, and they're typically phrased in the format of describe a time when you, or tell me about a time when you, ... and that behavioral skill will be baked into that question. So, Michelle, Rick, either one of you, I'm just going to punt here, want to give a good response to something like that, or do you have any light you'd like to shed on what I just shared?
Well, I'll just chime in real quick this was mentioned last week, but the star-based response, right? So they're asking you a behavioral question. So you want to talk about a situation or a task that you had, what the actions were that you took, and the results of that. And so they're looking to complete their star, right? So if they're taking notes, they're going to probably, I don't know, this is probably from the 80s, but I used to put a star and I used to put STAR and then I'd fill in the spaces. So when you're answering a behavioral question, you want to make sure that you're going to hit those things because that's what they're looking for.
And Rick, to that point, and we got to be really clear about this. Star stories are what I call a once upon a time story. Think of it that way. Sky was blue, there were 3 clouds in it, this is what was going on. It's a real live, something happened. It is not, ready guys? It is not a generic story. It is not supposed to be, well, generally speaking, this is what I generally do. They're literally looking for a specific time. And the reason for that was a lot of reasons for it. But first of all, when you do a star story, some people call it SAR, PAR, CAR, it's all the same thing. It's a story, beginning, middle, and end, right? Back, tell the situation, what was your actions and what was the result. It's a very credible kind of story because if it's a real story. In other words, you can't fake it. Employers know that. They're going to see your body language. You're going to fill it in with some color and some detail. They'll be able to probe, well, how did that happen? Well, tell me more about this and that. If you only give a generic story, they can't probe. They really just can't do much with it. Besides which, some people can fake that, right? I'm just saying that's just what it is. So you want to make sure that it's a very real, credible, right, in the moment story. Okay, so let's go on to the next question because I know we've got a bunch. Wendy?
Okay, and so along those lines, if a hiring manager asks you about a skill or an experience or a software program that you have not used before, how do you answer that question?
Great question. I'll go ahead and punt that one to Vern. Vern, you want to tackle that?
Sure. If you haven't used a skill before, certainly don't say you have, right? Never lie in an interview, but you've got to come up with can you come up with a similar example where a new software program was introduced into the organization? And this is how you approached it. This is what you did. This is how you got up to speed on it. Examples of where you've been challenged before in a learning situation and you've learned it quickly, you've got up to speed, you've been able to get proficient as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Show where you have. And by the way, if you've ever been exposed to that program or that skill, mention it. I mean, that's accurate, right? I'm familiar. I've been exposed. I partnered alongside someone who did do it and I watched them do it. And in fact, if you know already, if you've seen in the job description that skill is required, go ahead and do a little research. Hello, www. It's YouTube University now. You can learn stuff on the fly. Now, again, be accurate. Don't say that you have experience if you don't, but say, look, I've actually been doing some research on it. I have a little bit of familiarity. at least as something. And the reason why they're asking you that is because they want to make sure that, that you are minimizing your learning curve. That's the only reason why they want to know. Can you slide into the job with minimal ramp up time?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Shira, let me just, both of what Rick was saying, it's all about preparation, preparing those stories,
Yeah.
looking at the requirements and saying, well, this is in here and I don't have this. What am I, how do I
Absolutely.
prepare for that?
Exactly right. Be prepared to address things that you don't have. Yeah. Excellent. Great. All right, Wendy.
Okay. If you're the first candidate to interview for the position and the hiring manager tells you that it's going to take 3 weeks for them to get back to you, how do you stay front and center, and when is a good time to follow up?
Great question. You need to honor what the person said. So that means that they're actually doing what they're saying. They're going to be vetting people for those 3 weeks. So you want to go, you kind of need to go radio silent. That's just kind of, now definitely follow up with a thank you note. Absolutely. Any person you meet with, including the recruiter, we recruiters, I don't know about you, Michelle. I know I don't get a whole lot of thank you notes, okay? A lot of people just sort of bypass us and send the thank you note to the hiring manager. Send the thank you note to the recruiter, okay? Be courteous about that. Just kind of shows your professionalism. But anyway, send your note and that's it. Now, if there's some legitimate follow-up, like a sample you wanted to send them, or something else that is appropriate, by all means, or specific questions that you had, that you can send that. But you don't want to pester them. You want to make sure that you wait till that, whatever that time frame is. Let's say it's the 3 weeks. If you haven't heard back, like another week later, because remember they've got to vet, they've got to take their time. Then it's okay to ping them once, just to say, hey, still interested, just let you know. But remember, guys, you don't want to let your anxiety rule the day. These recruiters, if they are interested in you, they will track you down. Like I say, they will send a carrier pigeon to your home to let you know that they are interested if you are the one. So don't worry about it. You just see that job as one egg in your basket, and you just keep networking. You keep doing your thing, because you never know what's going to pop when. The appropriate follow-up, that's fine, but you don't want to pester, and you certainly don't want to get nervous about it, because again, it's a lot of competition. Keep networking. And remember, we always say this, find the internal champion. I know that's more on the front end of things to actually get the interview. But if there is somebody internally, even while you're being considered, that could just throw a little pebble in the pond to recommend you, that's always a good sort of backdrop to your interview to help reemphasize your candidacy. So, okay. All right, Wendy.
Do you recommend any companies which say they can help you beat the ATS screening system?
Any companies or any apps? So there is, Joe Weech has been sharing this jobseer.ai, JOBSEER.ai. That I know she raves about it in terms of helping to screen resumes. Rick, I don't know if last time you had mentioned this as well. Did you have a tip on this? Because I know in your world, and Michelle as well, because I know you guys do a lot of ATS work.
Actually, I don't this time. The jobseer.ai is something new that Joe introduced to me, but it's a software program, I'm assuming, that basically maps your resume to the job posting.
Yeah.
To see what percentage of match it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you mentioned, Shira, if you don't match 80% of the requirements, one, you either need to redo your resume if you have the skills, or maybe it's not a good fit.
Yeah, agree. Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would agree with Rick as well. I mean, it's all about, I think, the keywords and matching your resume as closely to the job description or job posting.
Yeah, and keywords, and remember, English is a very fluid language. We have a lot of synonyms, okay, to say the exact same thing. So you want to really dive in and look at the phraseology that they're using. The classic example I always give is, what's really the difference between event planning and meeting planning? Now, people who are in that field will take issue with that, okay, conference planning, but frankly, a lot of people interchangeably use those phrases. So if they said event planning and you said meeting planning, you should use event planning. Sounds silly, but especially when it comes to the ATS, those little key words can make a difference in terms of getting you noticed. Okay. Good. All right, Wendy.
What are the best questions to ask about culture during a first or second interview?
That's a great question. Vern, do you want to take that one?
Well, certainly ask them how they would describe their culture. In other words, what are their values? What, you know, and can you give me an example of how, you know, if trust is a, you know, an example of one of the values that you have in your organization, can you give me an example of an actual situation where that played out? I find the culture question, while you need to ask it, it's really difficult to really understand the culture until probably you've accepted the job and you're actually in the organization. The other thing to do is, again, network, find people that have, you know, worked for that company. Glassdoor, you know, there's ways to find out, tell me about that organization, tell me what it's like. And so those are the first things that come to my mind.
Yeah, and I would also add, thanks for that, Vern, is that there can be a difference between the organizational culture and the departmental culture.
Mhm.
And you definitely want to make sure that you ask about both. Now, how you hear the responses, let me give you a tip on that. Whether you're doing Zoom, which of course we're all doing now, or eventually when you go back in person, you can really see body language. You want to be mindful of this, because let's put it this way. If an employer, recruiter, HR person thinks their culture or the culture of the department is fabulous, they will basically jump through the screen to let you know. It'll be all over their face. They won't be able to shut up. I mean, they'll be ranting and raving, oh, we're this and that. If not, they will probably be a little bit cagey and reserved. And they'll probably say something like, well, that's a great question. You know, we're working toward a culture of that kind of thing, right? They'll probably be very measured in how they explain it. They might take a pause. Now, that doesn't mean to say you shouldn't pursue the job, because look, I mean, nobody's perfect, no culture is perfect, but be aware of this. And especially if you have come from or are leaving an organization because of a cultural situation, be specific about what your question is. Because remember, the employer does that all the time. They ask you about things that they've been burned by or things that is important to them. You can do the same thing. If you've been in the workforce for any longer than a minute and you know what's important to you, you can be friendly and professional about it to say, how do you guys handle this? Or whatever the situation is, and just listen for the authenticity of that response, and then probe a little bit if you need to. So just be thoughtful about how you're listening. Okay, Wendy.
So this is the salary question again, but I think this is always of interest to everybody. So how soon in the interview process should you start the salary conversation, and how to address significant salary gaps? For example, 30K less than you expected.
Right. I'll take this one just because this is one of my favorite topics. Okay, how long do we have? So first of all, by and large, you should not be bringing up the salary conversation. Okay, we're still a little bit unequally balanced in that side of things. Things are changing because of the pay equity laws that are coming up in this country now. I think the last we talked about last week, 25 or so states and counties in the union now have it as a law where the employer cannot ask you what your salary history was. Not every state, but it's coming to a theater near you. That said, of course, you don't want to waste your time, right? You don't want to go for a position that's way under. And so how do you do this? Well, here's what you can do. Well, first, what you don't want to do, you cannot, it's still not couth for you to say to the employer, hey, what's your budget? What's your range? It's just not quite the appropriate thing. What you can do though, is at the end of the first level interview, if the topic of salary has not been brought up by the employer, you can do what I call is the Sims commercial. For those of you who in the DC area will know that old commercial that says, an educated consumer is my best customer, okay, that one. So here's what you can do. You can say to the employer, look, I've had a wonderful conversation. Before we wrap up, I want to help you make a good hiring decision. So if it's okay, I'd like to share with you what my compensation expectations are, just to make sure that I'm in your range. Okay, so you are offering information proactively. You're not asking them, you're not putting them on the spot. You're simply saying, I want to educate you. Now, you don't have to do this, but if it's really important to you, which it is for most people, you can simply say, what I'm targeting is, and I have a whole formula around this, where you go after one number, not a range. Do not give the employer a range of two numbers. Why? Because they won't offer you anything less than everybody together, the lowest number. Okay, that's just the way it goes. It's a negotiation. It's like buying or selling a house, right? They're on one side, one wants to pay as little as possible, one wants to get as much, but you get it. So don't give two numbers, but you do want to figure out what I call your happy dance number is, the number that really feels kind of comfortable for you, where you're at in your career, the market. Do some research, figure it out, and you want to shoot for that amount and say, look, I'm seeking a total cash compensation package. I'm seeking a total cash compensation package in the, and then I would say X range. Now the range is not a number. It's not, excuse me, it's not two numbers, it's one number. It's I'm seeking a total cash compensation package in the 100K range, in the 150 range or mid 100s, that kind of thing. And if you decide to do the low, mid, and high, like low, mid, high hundreds or low, mid, high twos, that kind of thing, remember, if you ever use that low, mid, high, there's a range, there's an inherent range there. So the typical low hundreds is what? 100 to like 120. So depending upon where your happy dance number is, you have to be aware if you use that phrase, they're going to try to go for the low end of that. Okay, so just you got to do a little bit of a dance. But what I would do is just, again, offer them your information up front. Okay, Wendy.
Okay. So someone said, I get the idea of customizing your resume to the job, but it gets really tiring. How can a resume be set up that needs minimal tweaking?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share real quickly. I don't typically do a lot of training of my own stuff, but I'm going to just take a second here and show you. Give me a sec. My own resume. So as all of you know, because I mentioned at the beginning of all of our calls, part of my practice is I am a resume writer. Okay, so I'm just going to do a very quick screen share and show you the resume template that I use, because I create resumes, I write resumes, and I created one that I believe is, and I've gotten very good feedback from other recruiters on this, that's very recruiter friendly and very easily customizable. And what you'll notice here is that it's very keyword focused, in that the keywords are in various places. They're in the top, there's a text box, which we'll get to in a second, and most specifically, next to every single accomplishment story, the accomplishment story is labeled with a competency. That way, it takes minimal tweaking. You keep your stories, but remember, every story has a lot of competencies naturally baked into it. You're just extracting the one that you think is most appropriate. And so all you have to do is just change the competencies, all right? So let me just show this to you super fast. This is a redacted resume. Okay, and so basically what happens here is you would have a career headline. Okay, so something that speaks to where you're going aspirationally. To the extent that you can change this and modify it to fit the role, do that as appropriate. Now, you wouldn't necessarily say director of membership if you're not one, or director of communications if you're not one. On the other hand, you can say, something kind of communications professional. So I'll give you an example. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. So I have a client whose resume I had done, and she wanted to customize it, and she was looking in an association, and it was a membership role, and the membership role was membership recruitment. Well, what she unfortunately did before she sent her resume to me is right up here, she said membership sales, all right? But that wasn't the kind of concept that they were using. They were using recruitment, and it sounds very subtle, but you've got to make sure that you're putting in, if you're going to do a career headline, that it's got to have the right nuance to sort of frame up, if you will, advertise. You think of this as an advertising document, that what they see in the heading is what's going to capture their attention. Down here, we have competencies that are in a text box. Again, I'll talk about that in a second. And then down here, every single accomplishment is labeled with a competency, all right? So all you have to do is just change the competency labels, and then down at the bottom, you have education and certifications and whatever else, all right? So I wanted to show you that super fast because I wanted you to see that there is a way to style your resumes that makes it very easy. Now, people often will ask, well, what about, a formatting, and is it going to get, locked up in the ATS? There is no perfect way to do this, and I think every recruiter kind of talks about it differently. And Rick, I'd really want you to pop in here, maybe Michelle even, because the thing is that with ATSs, applicant tracking systems, yeah, they do get a little messed up when there's funky formatting, like I just showed you. That's pretty. What I showed you was pretty, okay, but not necessarily the most functional if you are applying to within an applicant tracking system. One of the ways to get around that is to turn that into a PDF, which turns it into a picture. course, the problem with that sometimes is that the ATS won't necessarily pick up all the words. So what you can do is you can turn into a plain text, which I know is the most boring thing in the world, but it's functional and it works. You could keep it in Word and just take out the text box and take out some of the extra formatting, but you can still leave the keywords there next to the bullets, right? And then if for whatever reason, if you call the recruiter and they say, hey, I can't really read this, you can send it in a different format. Rick, did you have any thoughts on that in terms of the whole formatting thing? Because I know this is a question that comes up a lot.
Just real quick, one additional idea is to have a functional resume with your functional skills near the top. I agree with Shira, the keywords near the top, identifiable is really key, that you can change in and out. And I like what she said about putting those titles in with each experience. But even just a functional resume, and down below, you'll have a chronological piece. But under the functional section, you can change in the different functions in and out with specific jobs to better match that specific job. So you're just dealing with that functional piece.
So this is one of those situations, you know how we have multiple experts on the calls? This is one of those situations where, you know, you get 2 recruiters in a room, you get five opinions. So I'm going to give you another opinion if that's okay. So, I respect what Rick just said, and I have a different opinion on that. And that is that in my experience as a recruiter, when I go down a resume, I want to see where you had all those accomplishments. So my challenge with functional resumes is that it doesn't actually show the employer where you accomplished those things. Because if you only have functional, then you have a little work history at the bottom, it doesn't marry everything up unless in the functional section, you were very specific and mentioned where you did those things. In other words, don't just have the accomplishment, but label it maybe in parens somewhere and say employer X, employer Y, employer Z. That's a way to get around that for sure. But other than that, if you can, you know, do the chronological, but make sure that the functional competencies are baked in, that's another way. Just remember, recruiters want to know where you accomplished what you're saying you accomplished.
Just one more point, Shira. As a recruiter, I may only get down a third of the page. So it's really important that I see what you have. You know, it's because if I have a bunch of resumes, I'm going to be looking to make sure that you have those pieces.
Yep, thanks so much. Okay, great. Wendy.
So how to do a star story when it's obvious what company the story relates to, and you don't want to say anything negative about your previous supervisor or company?
Well, here's the thing about that. You're absolutely right. Never throw your employer under the bus. But here's the thing, when you're talking about a star story, look, the assumption is that the star story is going to be about a specific company, and they're assuming that you're going to be relating it. It's all in how you frame it, right? So you don't want to say anything negative, but understand too, everybody's got challenges. In fact, that's the definition of work, isn't it? Work is overcoming a problem. That means every single employer you've ever worked for has had problems for you to solve. So you're not throwing them under the bus by saying, here was the problem and here's how I resolved it. That's life. Now, what would be inappropriate is, you know, finger pointing on certain personalities and so dropped the ball and no. You can simply say there was a situation. You don't have to name names, right? Just say there was a situation where a client or a coworker or what, just very generically, this is what was going on. Here's what I did to help resolve it. And here was the result. Okay, so you're talking about a problem. You're not naming names. You're not throwing people under the bus. You're simply saying, look, there was a problem here because that was my job to solve it. So hopefully that helps. Okay,
so what is the difference between the keywords and highlighting your key competencies?
It's the same thing, more or less, meaning we talk about keywords and key competencies. What we're saying is that in the job posting, the employer is listing out, and they call it skills and competencies oftentimes are interchangeable in recruiter land. Yes, there's some subtlety, but by and large, it's really the same thing. The employer is saying, have you, can you, and they're using specific key phrases, key skills, right? Hard skills meaning functional skills, things you do. That's really, just so you know, that's what employers are looking for in a resume. They're not looking for your soft skills. Can I just say that again? On a resume, they are not looking for your soft skills. They're looking for your hard skills. You know where they're looking for your soft skills? In the interview. Okay. So your resume is about hard skills. Your interview is about soft skills. So on your resume, make sure the key skills, one could call them competencies. Some people think of competencies as soft skills. I get it. But really the hard skills that have yous need to be in your resume. And then in this interview, that's where you talk about your behavioral or your soft skills.
So your generic resume was passed along to a hiring manager. They interview you as you come highly recommended. You highlight your relevant experience during the interview, but would you follow up with a rewritten resume?
Yes.
As there is a good chance that you'll be interviewing with other team members.
Absolutely. And you would tee that up with the recruiter and literally say exactly just that. Say, look, Mr. Recruiter, hire manager, whoever you were talking to, I'm so thankful that I've been considered for this role. My so-and-so sent in my generic resume. Now that we've had a chance to talk, I would like to take the opportunity to customize my resume specifically for this role to help future people in the hiring process to vet my candidacy even further. Would that be okay? Well, they're going to say no, of course not. They understand the process. So yeah, just let them know you're going to do it and then do it. Mm-hmm.
What suggestions do you have about having left an employer over a disagreement about direction? No hard feelings, just mutually agreed that you were going in different directions.
I think that the question is the answer. I think it's literally that. Hey, Vern, since you've been you were in corporate hiring for a long time, any specific advice you'd have around that?
No, other than don't go into any details, right? I don't think there's any need to go into. In fact, it probably could hurt you if you went into details and got off the railroad track, so to speak. You've decided to go in a different direction, and really what the interviewer should be worrying about is again, do your skills and experience meet what we need at this organization? Yeah.
Wendy?
How do you answer the why you question, or why should we hire you?
Fantastic question. This is the other way of saying tell me about yourself. It's pretty much, they're going for the same thing. You need to, this is actually one of the most important questions I think that was asked today, because this has everything to do with where you're going in your career, number one. And number two, how in fact do you line up with this role? And you should be asking yourself this before you even apply. Why you? Why now? Why them? You need to have a really good response. Now, I get it that there's a dance here. Your career goals and their business goals could be, hopefully they're a little closer than that, and hopefully there's actually a mesh. To the extent that there actually really is a mesh, you're going to be able to answer that question much more easily. But what I would really recommend that you do is that first, you get really clear again, your brand, where you're going, your target, your value proposition, your own why in your career. However, make sure that you are also addressing their business goals. So to harken back to my earlier story about the candidate who yesterday gave me this beautiful cover letter that was all about his leadership skills, but like not at all, anything about the role. Okay. So it was obviously very important for him to let me know. He's very proud of the fact that he's got this wonderful leadership stuff, which is terrific. But he wasn't quite really reading into the job posting to say, my client has some very specific business needs, some organizational needs that we want candidates to address, right? So that's going to be really important. So first, yes, figure out what you want to do, your why, the impact you want to make. But be sure that it's not just focused on you. When you're answering that question, don't come from a you perspective, come from a them perspective. Why you, why us, why now? Because Mr. Employer, Ms. Employer, look, my passion is helping solve challenges just like yours, helping make an impact in a mission just like yours. And when I read this announcement and I read that you were trying to solve these challenges in this way, that spoke to me. And here's why. My experience in this, my passion for that, my skill in the other, and you're just weaving together a beautiful narrative, a compelling narrative that tells them why they should be thinking about you. So it's not just why you want this role, which is important, but why should they consider you? That's what they're really asking. Do you have a passion, interest, and experience to help them solve their urgent business problems? So,
Shira, let me just add to that. that also a shorter version of that should be at the close, right? At the end of the interview, right? Thanks so much for taking the time. I've really enjoyed this. And as we've said in the interview, I'm the right fit for this job at the right time. And I look forward to, further, what are the next steps in the process, something like that.
Excellent. That's terrific. All right. So with that, we're at 10:06. So let me go ahead and wrap us up here before we get back into the breakout rooms. All right. So if you'd like to keep in touch with us, here is our contact information for now. And Rick, we will make sure to get you on our little spreadsheet soon. So feel free to take a picture of this slide if you want to stay in touch. I'll keep this open for another few seconds. Okay. And if you want to get connected with other job seeker groups here in the DC area, but of course in Zoom land, there's freebie stuff all over the country, but these are several that I found very, very helpful. All of these are free except for JCA at the bottom right. They offer Career Gateway Bootcamp for $75, and they do that usually once a month. I do have a biweekly newsletter that I started about a month ago. If you're interested in getting on that, it's just a real kind of encouraging tip. Feel free to email me directly and make sure that you're on it. And if you think you might already be on it, but you haven't been getting it, please check your spam because that often happens.
Hey, Shira, can we go back to that one
Sure.
slide before?
This one here?
No, the other, yeah, right there. One's on here.
Sure.
And can you go back one more?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, and here's my newsletter. And I, of course, like to end with an inspirational quote from the Bible. And this says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." All about the testing of our faith. Okay, that's from James. All right, and speaking of which, I do have a prayer session that I've been leading for the last couple of weeks immediately following this meeting. So if you would like to stay on the call after we have wrapped up, you are certainly welcome to do so, and I'll be leading you all in prayer. All right.
I highly recommend everyone showing up for that thing. It's very, very inspirational. Thank you very much for doing it.
Of course, of course. So we're going to break into speed networking groups right now, another 10 minutes where you'll have a chance to go around the room. And this time, make sure to talk about what your needs are, right? Your career goals, what kind of job you're looking for, if there's an industry connection that you would like to make, share job lists with each other, and make sure to share your contact information as well. All right, so let me go ahead and get you guys back into your rooms. And here we go.
Hey, Shira, I would recommend putting that link for the spreadsheet in the chat room because you can't cut and paste it. Thanks.
Got it. Okay, will do. Thanks so much. And for those who are watching this recording, feel free to fast forward about 9 minutes and then we'll wrap up together. All right, hopefully that was a good networking exercise for you guys. So before we wrap up and close up here, the facilitators who were in the room, any experts, do you want to share any highlights from your rooms? Vern, Michelle, Rick?
Well, luckily we had a coach in there. So we got, Janet was in there. So that was helpful information from her. And also Daniel shared as well, but Kimberly was talking about her place in her search from an economic perspective, right? Comes from a lot of high level positions, but at this point in her life, she doesn't really need the high level money to go along with it. So we kind of talked through that, which was really helpful. And Ken had some good suggestions for her as well.
Any that you want to share with the group that might be helpful for everybody who's in a similar situation?
Well, Ken was talking about in the cover letter that she could kind of give a part of her situation. I mean, obviously, because I know Kimberly personally, and so we looked at her resume, and I said, the first thing I would think when looking at your resume is you're too expensive. Why are you doing this? So if you can alleviate some of those questions ahead of time, then I'm more likely to say, hey, I mean, she has passive income that comes in, she has other things. So not everyone's looking for the $200,000 job. And they all have reasons for that. And so you have to be able to kind of keep that interest in the recruiter. So they'll ask the question, in their mind, they'll say, hey, this person, maybe they're retired, they have a pension. There's a lot of variables that you need to look at.
Yeah, we recruiters tend to make assumptions when we don't have any other data to refute our assumptions. So, yeah, for sure. Hey, by the way, Jeffrey just posted a question about the recording in the chat rooms. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, Zoom does not have a feature where where one can record in the chat rooms. So we just have the main room here. So sorry for that information. But if someone finds a different feature on Zoom that I'm not aware of, please let me know. All right.
But you can save the chat though.
Yeah.
You can save the chat in the main chat room. Jeffrey asked if he could record, have a recording of the breakout room. Unfortunately, we can't do the breakout rooms yet.
Can't do that.
Yeah,
can't do that.
unfortunately.
Shira, let me, in our group, let me share, we talked about networking and how important it is, even in networking, to share your stories. And I actually used the example of you reaching out to me for Boomer Works. Mm-hmm. And I asked you the question, how did it get started? Mm-hmm. And you told me the story. Mm-hmm. And I still remember the story a week later. Mm-hmm. So the point being that stories stick.
They do.
They really engage your whole brain, all aspects of your brain, the emotions, the challenges, whatever's in the story. And the more people can remember you, whether it's through a story, the greater likelihood that if they see a job or an opportunity, they'll remember, who the person was in the story. And you need every edge you can get in a job search.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. And I guess the point there is make it memorable.
Yes. Yes.
It's like when you're a little kid, right? And somebody reads you a story, you remember the story. There's a little emotion, a little drama. There's an arc to the story. Yeah. You're leaning on the edge of your seat. You want to make sure that your stories are memorable. So practice it with friends. Say,
yes, absolutely practice. Yes.
Yeah. And by the way, you are all welcome to record any piece of this, the chat or the breakout rooms as you like. We're making this public. It was just the Zoom doesn't allow our recordings for the breakout, but you're certainly welcome to record on your own. Okay. Any facilitators want to share anything else before we wrap up? We good? All right. So with that, this concludes the official part of our Hire Moment Mastermind. If anyone would like to stay on the call for the prayer meeting, you're certainly welcome to. Otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing everyone else next week. Have a blessed day, everyone.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. My first
Hi,
one.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.